The giant space station called Orion Gate was always crowded. Thousands of ships arrived every day from different planets across the galaxy. Traders shouted from their stores, travelers rushed through the busy halls, and security drones floated above the crowds. Bright lights covered every wall, making the station look alive even during the darkest hours of space. For most people, it was a place full of opportunity. For others, it was simply a place to survive another day. Among the crowd walked a human named Ethan Carter. He was tired after working a long 12-hour shift unloading cargo ships. His back hurt, his hands were sore, and his stomach was growling with hunger. The work paid very little, but it was enough to keep a roof over his head. Life had not been easy for Ethan since the accident that had taken away his wife and daughter years ago. Ethan slowly made his way through the market district. The smell of food filled the air from hundreds of restaurants and food stalls. Alien merchants sold meals from every corner of the galaxy. Some foods glowed with strange colors, while others floated above their plates. Ethan ignored most of them. He did not have enough credits to waste money. Finally, he stopped at a small food stand and bought the cheapest meal he could find. Holding the warm container in his hands, Ethan searched for a quiet place to sit. After several minutes, he found an empty table near the edge of the station's central market. The area was less crowded, and for the first time all day, he could relax. He opened the container and stared at the simple meal. It was not much, but after a hard day of work, it looked good enough. Just as he lifted the first bite toward his mouth, a soft voice spoke behind him. "Sir, can we have your leftovers?" The voice was so quiet that Ethan almost thought he imagined it. He slowly lowered his food and turned around. Standing a few feet away were 4 small alien children. They looked nervous, as if they expected him to yell at them or chase them away. Their clothes were old and torn, and their faces were covered with dirt. It was obvious they had not been cared for in a very long time. For a moment, Ethan simply stared at them. The oldest looked no older than 12. The youngest could not have been more than 6 years old. All 4 were thin and weak. Their eyes showed the kind of hunger that went far beyond missing a single meal. Ethan had seen hungry people before, but these children looked completely exhausted. The oldest child stepped forward carefully. "We're sorry to bother you, sir. We just thought maybe you weren't going to finish your food." Ethan looked around the market. Hundreds of people walked past the children without even looking at them. Some aliens noticed them and quickly turned away. Others acted as if the children did not exist. The sight made Ethan uncomfortable. They were only kids, yet nobody seemed willing to help them. Then Ethan noticed something strange. His eyes moved from one child to another. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. But after looking closer, he realized he was not mistaken. All 4 children had bright blue eyes. Ethan's heart suddenly stopped for a moment. Blue eyes were extremely rare among alien species, yet every single child standing before him had the exact same deep blue color. The color reminded him of someone he had not seen in years. His daughter. The memory hit him like a wave. He remembered her smile, her laughter, and the way her bright blue eyes lit up whenever she was happy. He had spent years trying to bury those memories because they hurt too much. Yet now those same eyes were staring back at him from 4 frightened alien children. For several seconds, Ethan could not speak. Something deep inside him felt broken all over again. He knew these children were strangers. They were not human. They had no connection to his family. So why did looking at them hurt so much? The youngest child slowly stepped closer. Her small hands trembled as she looked at Ethan's meal. "Please, sir," she whispered. "We haven't eaten for 3 days." Ethan felt his chest tighten. 3 days. No child should ever have to say those words. As he looked into those impossible blue eyes, he realized this was not a simple request for food. Something was very wrong. These children were hiding something, and whatever it was had left them scared, alone, and starving on one of the busiest stations in the galaxy. Without knowing why, Ethan had a feeling that meeting these 4 children was about to change his life forever. Ethan remained silent for several seconds as he looked at the 4 children standing in front of him. Their faces showed exhaustion, but it was their eyes that stayed in his mind. Those bright blue eyes reminded him of memories he had spent years trying to forget. The youngest child looked at the food in his hands with quiet hope. while the others waited nervously for his answer. They seemed prepared for rejection, as if it was something they experienced every day. The human slowly looked down at his meal and then back at the children. He could see hunger in every movement they made. Their thin bodies and tired faces told a story that words could not explain. Without saying anything, Ethan stood from his chair and closed the food container. The children immediately lowered their heads, believing he was about to leave like everyone else. They had seen that reaction many times before. Instead, Ethan surprised them. He motioned for them to follow him and began walking toward one of the larger food stalls nearby. The children exchanged confused looks before carefully following him through the crowd. They stayed close together, as if they were afraid of becoming separated. Ethan noticed how often they looked over their shoulders. It was almost as though they expected someone to appear at any moment. The food stall belonged to a large alien merchant with gray skin and 4 arms. The merchant looked at Ethan with a bored expression as he approached the counter. Ethan spent nearly all the credits he had earned that day and ordered enough food for 5 people. The merchant seemed surprised by the large order, but he prepared it without asking questions. Within minutes, several containers filled with hot food were placed on the counter. When Ethan handed the meals to the children, they stared at him in disbelief. For a moment, nobody moved. It was as if they could not believe the food was actually meant for them. Then the youngest child carefully accepted a container with shaking hands. The others quickly followed, and within seconds they began eating. They did not eat like children enjoying a meal. They ate like people who feared the food might disappear at any moment. Ethan sat quietly and watched them. His heart grew heavier with every bite they took. The children were trying to eat slowly and politely, but their hunger was too great. It was obvious they had gone far too long without proper food. Around them, the crowded market continued as normal. Hundreds of people passed by, yet nobody stopped to help. Some aliens glanced at the children before quickly looking away. As the children ate, Ethan noticed something strange. Several nearby merchants were staring at them with uncomfortable expressions. One alien woman gathered her belongings and moved to another table. A group of traders suddenly ended their conversation and left the area. It was almost as if people wanted to avoid being seen near the children. The behavior made no sense, and Ethan's curiosity began to grow. A few minutes later, an older alien merchant approached Ethan's table. The merchant had deep wrinkles across his face and moved with the help of a mechanical walking stick. He glanced at the children before leaning closer to Ethan. His voice was low, making sure nobody else could hear what he was saying. "You should not be helping them," the merchant warned quietly. "Finish your meal and walk away. Forget you ever saw them." Ethan frowned and looked at the old merchant. The warning sounded serious, but it only created more questions. He asked what was wrong with the children and why everyone seemed afraid of them. The old merchant hesitated for several seconds before shaking his head. Fear appeared in his eyes, and he quickly stepped backward. "You do not understand," he said softly. "Some secrets bring trouble to anyone who gets too close." Before Ethan could ask another question, the merchant turned and disappeared into the crowd. The strange conversation left Ethan even more confused. He looked back toward the children, but they seemed focused entirely on their food. Whatever secret the merchant knew, the children either did not know it or were trying to hide it. As the meal continued, Ethan noticed the youngest child struggling to keep her eyes open. She looked exhausted. While adjusting her torn jacket, something slipped from her pocket and landed on the floor beside the table. The small metallic object rolled across the ground before stopping near Ethan's boot. The little girl gasped and immediately reached for it. However, Ethan picked it up first and examined it closely. It was a silver pendant attached to a broken chain. The object looked old, but a strange symbol had been carved into its surface. The moment Ethan saw the symbol, his entire body froze. He knew that symbol. Years ago, during a classified mission deep in unexplored space, Ethan had seen that exact marking inside a secret government facility. At the time, nobody had explained its meaning, and all records connected to it had vanished shortly afterward. He had never seen it again. Until now. The color drained from Ethan's face as he stared at the pendant. Slowly, he lifted his eyes toward the 4 children. For the first time, he began to wonder if meeting them had not been an accident at all, and somewhere in the station, hidden among the crowd, Someone was already watching them. Ethan could not stop staring at the silver pendant resting in his hand. The strange symbol carved into its surface brought back memories he had not thought about in years. During his time in the military, he had seen that exact mark inside a heavily restricted research facility located far beyond the borders of civilized space. At the time, he had been ordered to forget everything he saw there. Questions were not allowed, and anyone who asked too much was quickly removed from the project. The youngest child nervously reached for the pendant again. Her small hands trembled as she looked up at Ethan. The fear in her eyes was impossible to miss. Ethan slowly handed the pendant back to her, noticing how carefully she hid it beneath her jacket. Whatever the pendant meant, it was clearly important to her. More importantly, she seemed terrified that someone might take it away. For a few moments, nobody spoke. The children continued eating, though much more slowly than before. The older three exchanged nervous glances whenever Ethan looked at them. It was obvious they knew something. The question was whether they trusted him enough to talk about it. Ethan leaned back in his chair and decided not to push too hard. Frightened children rarely opened up when they felt cornered. The silence lasted several minutes before the oldest child finally spoke. His voice was cautious, as if every word had to be carefully chosen. He thanked Ethan for the food and admitted that nobody had helped them in a very long time. Most people ignored them. Others treated them like they were dangerous. Ethan listened carefully, noticing the sadness hidden behind the boy's calm expression. "Where are your parents?" Ethan finally asked. The question immediately changed the atmosphere around the table. The younger children lowered their heads, and the oldest boy looked away. For several seconds, nobody answered. The reaction alone told Ethan everything he needed to know. Whatever happened to their parents was not a happy story. The second oldest child finally broke the silence. She explained that they did not know who their parents were. As far as they could remember, they had spent their entire lives inside a large facility. They had never celebrated birthdays, never attended school, and never experienced a normal childhood. Most of their memories involved white walls, bright lights, and adults wearing laboratory uniforms. Ethan felt a chill run through his body. The more they talked, the more familiar the story sounded. Research facilities, scientists, secret experiments, missing families. He had heard stories like this before, though most people considered them conspiracy theories. According to official records, projects involving children had been outlawed decades ago. Yet the children sitting in front of him sounded like living proof that some organizations had ignored those laws. The youngest child quietly looked around the crowded market before speaking. She explained that many other children had once lived in the facility with them. At first, there had been dozens. Then the number slowly became smaller. Some children disappeared after medical tests. Others were taken away and never returned. Nobody explained what happened to them. The scientists simply acted as though those children had never existed. A heavy silence settled over the table. Even the noise of the market seemed distant now. Ethan noticed that the children were no longer focused on their food. Instead, they looked frightened by the memories they were sharing. Whatever they had escaped from, it had left deep scars that would not disappear easily. As the conversation continued, Ethan finally asked about their unusual blue eyes. The children exchanged uncertain looks. None of them seemed to know the answer. They only remembered scientists studying them constantly. Blood tests, medical scans, and endless examinations had been part of their daily lives. The researchers always seemed interested in their eyes, though they never explained why. The oldest boy revealed one final detail that made Ethan's stomach tighten. According to the scientists, the children were considered special. They were different from the others, more valuable. The researchers had spent years trying to create them. Ethan immediately understood what that meant. These children were not random test subjects. Someone had designed them. Someone had created them for a purpose. The realization sent dozens of questions through Ethan's mind. Who created them? Why were they so important? And why was everyone on the station so afraid of them? The answers felt close, yet still completely out of reach. Before Ethan could ask another question, a sudden movement caught his attention. Across the market, near a group of supply vendors, a tall figure stood partially hidden behind a cargo container. The stranger appeared to be watching their table. At first, Ethan assumed it was nothing, but then he noticed the small device in the person's hand. It was a camera. The stranger quickly took several photographs before turning away. His movements were calm and professional, as though he had done this many times before. Ethan immediately stood from his chair, intending to follow him. However, by the time he pushed through the crowd, the mysterious figure had already disappeared. A feeling of unease settled deep inside him. When Ethan returned to the table, the children looked worried. They had noticed the stranger as well. The oldest boy's face had gone pale. He whispered something to his younger sister, and fear instantly appeared in her eyes. "What is it?" Ethan asked. The boy swallowed hard before answering. "He's one of them." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Before he could ask what that meant, a small communication device hidden beneath a nearby table suddenly activated. A blinking red light appeared on its screen. A message flashed across the display. "Target located. Tracking confirmed. Recovery team deployed." The children froze. And for the first time, Ethan realized that someone was hunting them. The moment Ethan read the message on the device, a cold feeling spread through his chest. The words were simple, but their meaning was terrifying. Someone had found the children. Worse, whoever was looking for them already knew their location. Ethan quickly picked up the small communicator and examined it, but the screen went dark before he could learn anything more. It was clear that the message had not been meant for him. The 4 children looked terrified. Their faces had lost all color, and even the oldest boy seemed unable to hide his fear. The youngest girl clutched her silver pendant tightly against her chest. Her small hands were shaking so badly that Ethan could see them trembling from across the table. Whatever organization was searching for them, the children clearly knew exactly what it was capable of. Without wasting another second, Ethan told the children to stand up. The crowded market was no longer safe. If a recovery team was already on its way, staying in one place would only make them easier to find. The children obeyed immediately. They did not ask questions or hesitate. That alone told Ethan how serious the situation had become. The group moved quickly through the crowded station. Around them, thousands of travelers continued their daily routines without realizing anything was wrong. Merchants shouted advertisements, cargo drones floated overhead, and visitors hurried toward departing ships. To everyone else, it looked like a normal day. But Ethan felt as though invisible eyes were following them through every corridor. As they entered a quieter section of the station, the oldest boy finally spoke. His voice was low and nervous. He explained that the people searching for them never gave up. The children had escaped nearly 4 months earlier, yet the hunters continued tracking them across multiple systems. Every time they thought they were safe, someone eventually found them. It always ended the same way. They had to run again. Ethan listened carefully while leading them deeper into the station. The more he learned, the more disturbing the story became. According to the boy, the facility where they had lived was hidden on a remote world far from any major trade routes. The scientists rarely allowed the children outside their rooms. Most days were spent undergoing tests and examinations. Anyone who refused was punished. The second oldest girl revealed another frightening detail. Many of the adults working at the facility were not scientists at all. Some were soldiers. They carried weapons and guarded every hallway. Nobody was allowed to leave. Nobody was allowed to ask questions. The children had grown up believing that the outside world might not even exist. As they walked, Ethan noticed several security officers entering the market area behind them. They appeared normal at first glance, but something felt wrong. Their movements were too organized. They were searching, not patrolling. Every few minutes, one of them would stop and examine a handheld scanner before moving again. Ethan immediately led the children down another corridor. The station's lower maintenance levels were far less crowded than the upper districts. Dim lights flickered above old service tunnels, and the sounds of machinery echoed through the walls. It was not a place where most travelers wanted to spend time. For Ethan, however, it offered temporary cover. He had worked on the station long enough to know routes that many people ignored. Eventually, the group reached an abandoned storage area. Dust covered the floor and several unused cargo containers sat against the walls. Ethan carefully checked the area before allowing the children to rest. For the first time since leaving the market, they seemed able to breathe normally. Yet the fear in their eyes remained. While the children rested, Ethan continued asking questions. He wanted answers before the hunters found them again. After several minutes of hesitation, the oldest boy finally revealed the truth. The children had not escaped alone. A scientist had helped them. The revelation surprised Ethan. Until now, he had assumed everyone at the facility was involved in the experiments. But according to the boy, one researcher had secretly felt guilty about what was happening. The scientist believed the project had gone too far. One night, he disabled security systems and helped several children escape. A shadow crossed the boy's face as he continued the story. Not everyone made it out. Security forces discovered the escape before it was complete. Most of the children were captured again. Some disappeared afterward and were never seen. Only these 4 managed to reach a transport ship leaving the planet. The room fell silent. Ethan could hardly imagine what they had experienced. No child should ever have to live through something like that. Yet despite everything, they had survived. They had kept moving, kept fighting, and somehow stayed together. The strength hidden behind their fear impressed him more than he wanted to admit. Then the oldest boy revealed something even more shocking. The facility had not been studying them. The facility had created them. According to documents the scientist had shown him during their escape, the children were part of a classified genetic program. They were not natural births. They were engineered, designed, built for a purpose nobody fully understood. The scientists considered them experiments rather than people. Ethan felt his stomach twist. Suddenly the blue eyes made far more sense. The constant testing made sense. The hunters made sense. These children were not being searched for because they had escaped. They were being searched for because someone considered them valuable property. Before Ethan could process the revelation, a loud metallic sound echoed through the storage area. The noise came from the hallway outside. A second later, another sound followed. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming closer. The children immediately froze. Ethan moved toward the door and carefully looked through a narrow gap between 2 cargo containers. His heart nearly stopped. 3 armored figures were standing at the end of the corridor, and one of them was holding a scanner pointed directly toward their hiding place. Ethan's pulse quickened as he watched the 3 armored figures moving down the corridor. Their dark armor carried no official station markings, yet their equipment looked highly advanced. The scanner in the lead soldier's hands flashed with a steady blue light. Every few seconds, the device emitted a soft signal as it searched the area. Whatever technology they were using, it was slowly guiding them toward the storage room. Behind Ethan, the children sat frozen with fear. The youngest girl held her pendant so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The oldest boy moved closer to his younger siblings, placing himself between them and the door. It was a small gesture, but it told Ethan everything about his character. Despite being only a child, he was willing to protect the others no matter the cost. For a brief moment, Ethan considered leaving. The thought came and went quickly, but it was there. These were not his children. He had known them for only a few hours. Whatever trouble followed them had existed long before he arrived. If he walked away now, he could return to his normal life. He could avoid becoming involved in a dangerous situation that was clearly bigger than him. But as soon as the thought appeared, another memory followed. He remembered his daughter. He remembered the day she had looked at him with complete trust, believing her father could protect her from anything. That memory had stayed with him through every difficult year that followed her death. Looking at the frightened children now, Ethan felt the same responsibility growing inside him. The hunters continued moving closer. The scanner suddenly flashed brighter. One of the armored figures pointed directly toward the storage room. Ethan knew they had only minutes left. Without hesitation, he guided the children toward the rear of the room. Behind several old cargo containers was a maintenance hatch leading into the station's service tunnels. Most workers ignored those tunnels because they were cramped and confusing. Ethan had spent years working on the station and knew the routes well enough to navigate them. The oldest boy looked surprised when Ethan opened the hatch. "You know where this goes?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Enough to keep us alive." The children quickly climbed inside. Ethan followed and sealed the hatch behind them. Seconds later, he heard the storage room door slide open. The hunters had arrived. The narrow tunnel was dark and dusty. Only small emergency lights illuminated the path ahead. The air smelled of metal and old machinery. The children moved quietly behind Ethan as he led them deeper into the maze of service passages. Every few minutes, he stopped to listen for signs of pursuit. At first, there was only silence. Then came the sound of metal boots. The hunters had found the hatch. They were following. The chase continued through the tunnels for nearly 20 minutes. Ethan took turns whenever possible, choosing routes that would confuse anyone unfamiliar with the station. Several times they heard voices behind them. Once, a beam of light appeared around a distant corner, forcing the group to hide inside an unused maintenance compartment until the danger passed. Eventually, they reached an isolated section of the station rarely visited by travelers. Old cargo systems surrounded the area, and many of the rooms had been abandoned years earlier. For the moment, they were safe. The children collapsed onto the floor, exhausted from running. Ethan sat against a wall and tried to organize his thoughts. The situation was becoming impossible to ignore. These were not ordinary fugitives. Powerful people wanted them returned badly enough to send armed teams across the galaxy. Whatever secret they carried had to be enormous. As he rested, the oldest boy quietly approached him. "You should leave us," the boy said. Ethan looked up. The child lowered his eyes before continuing. "They always find us eventually. Everyone who helps us gets hurt. We don't want that to happen to you." For a moment, Ethan did not answer. The words felt far too mature for someone so young. No child should have to worry about the safety of adults. Yet this boy had clearly spent years carrying responsibilities that never should have been his. The others listened silently. Even the youngest girl seemed to expect Ethan to walk away. That realization hurt more than he expected. These children had become so used to abandonment that they already assumed he would leave. Ethan slowly stood. Then he looked directly at all 4 children. "I am not leaving." The words hung in the air. The children stared at him. "You bought us food," the second oldest girl said softly. "Most people wouldn't even do that." Ethan shook his head. "Food isn't enough." The oldest boy looked confused. "Why are you helping us?" The question was simple, yet answering it was surprisingly difficult. Ethan thought about his wife. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the years he had spent alone after losing everything that mattered to him. Most of all, he thought about the fear he had seen in these children's eyes since the moment they met. Finally, he spoke. "Because someone should." Silence filled the room. For the first time, the children seemed to believe him. The youngest girl smiled faintly. It was a small smile, but it felt like the first sign of hope any of them had shown all day. Unfortunately, hope did not last long. A sudden vibration shook the floor beneath them, then another and another. Ethan immediately recognized the feeling. Large ships were docking nearby. He moved toward a dusty observation window overlooking one of the station's external hangars. What he saw made his blood run cold. A massive military vessel had just arrived. Its black hull carried the same symbol engraved on the silver pendant. The symbol from the secret facility. The symbol from his forgotten mission. The symbol connected to the children. As dozens of armed troops began pouring from the ship, a message appeared on every public screen throughout the station. "Attention all citizens. By order of Galactic Security Command, 4 escaped test subjects are to be returned immediately. Anyone providing assistance will be arrested." Ethan slowly looked back at the children. The hunt had just become official, and now the entire station was searching for them.